60-day countdown begins for National Dialogue Committee following signing of the agreed legal framework and entrenching the 10-member team and its deliberations.
Gabon's military announces Brice Oligui Nguema as the country's transitional president. He was a former aide-de-camp to deposed leader Ali Bongo's father, President Omar Bongo, who died in 2009.
And to the skies, thousands of stargazers across the world witnessed the blue supermoon phenomenon on Wednesday night, a rare spectacle not to be seen again until 2037. Only once in a blue moon, something always happens. A rare spectacle. Only to be seen after 25 years. Something to look forward to in 2038 or 37. 2037. I'm curious where I'll be that time.
Interesting. You'll be an old guy, a grandfather by then.
Well, not as old.
Well, good morning and welcome to Morning Cafe. Hapa mambo ni tatu. Yeah, it is Thursday, it is the final day of August, and it is exactly 122 days left before the end of the year 2023.
Na kwa hayo mambo matatu, you only serve it hot.
Yes, as always.
As always.
At least that's one thing.
That's one thing constant.
Yes. Your favorite home girl, Flora Limuki, is not with us today, but hey, coffee will still be served as hot as always. My name is Freddie Ndimuli.
And yours truly, Stanley Nyeringita. Now, you definitely had this term, marriage is a scam in Nairobi, in Kenya. But is it really? We'll be discussing that particular conversation from around 8 a.m. to just get the whole figures on matters divorcees around in Nairobi, in Kenya. And is marriage working, by the way? And even for us who are still trying to get into that space, should we even be worried? Talk to us on our social media platforms and give us your views. What do you think about the whole marriage institution in Kenya?
It's a very interesting discussion when it comes to marriage. That's why I'm smiling. Don't ask me questions.
Okay.
My story is different.
I was about, but then I just know I don't. But anyway, good morning, Kenya. Let's get the top story this morning.
Oh, yes. To the top story now. For the first time in Kenya's history, churches have moved to self-regulate as the government undertakes a crackdown against rogue preachers and institutions. The latest move comes hot on the heels of the Shakahola massacre that has so far claimed close to 430 lives. Religious leaders, lawyers and human rights groups led by EACC chairperson Bishop David Oginde on Wednesday launched the Code of Conduct and Governance Guidelines for the Church in Kenya. The move is seen as a bid to counter impending state-imposed regulations on religious institutions. A 12-member steering committee chaired by Bishop Oginde drafted the rules. And so this leads us to our question this morning. We ask, should the government let churches regulate themselves? Should the government let churches regulate themselves? You can share your feedback on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. Should the government let churches regulate themselves? Before we get to the dailies, let's get the day's diary with Stanley. Well, before we get to the day's dailies, let's get the day's diary. Stanley, what's the latest?
Most definitely. Now, this is a whole snippet of what to expect in subsequent bulletins today. Matters Wi-Fi today and boosting digital economy. What the Kenya Kwanza government is really trying to achieve here. The Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Information, Communications and the Digital Economy, Eli Duale, will today preside over the official launches of free public Wi-Fi hotspots in Nakuru, Machakos and Makueni County. The CS is expected to start with Nakuru, then later go to Machakos County and finalize in Makueni County. Following up on that, just to get to know 1 year later what is the success and the hits and misses of Kenya Kwanza's government when it comes to digital footprint. From that into matters economy, Cabinet Secretary for Treasury and Economic Planning, Professor Njuguna Ndungu, is expected to be the chief guest today in a meeting with the Economic Society of Kenya. The agenda of the meeting is to delve into the role of economists in shaping Kenya's economic trajectory. And one major question they'll be asking in this particular meeting is, during the tenure of former president and the late president, Mwai Kibaki, economy was on a high, and so what has happened since then? Definitely stick around for that. Now let's switch to matters education. And the Public Investments Committee on Governance and Education is scheduled to conduct an inspection visit at Kiambu Institute of Science and Technology, that is KIST, early morning today. So among other issues, the committee will be probing the institution's land holdings as well as inspection of stalled projects within the institution. Right, now to matters health. The 7th Maisha Conference is being held in Mombasa County, is expected to come to a close today. It started 2 days ago, and the last session today will be focusing on accelerating progress in the HIV response and for the well-being of boys and men. Very own Elizabeth Atieno is right there in Mombasa County. She'll be updating us even after she gets out of Mombasa. Paul Muni is also there. Definitely have our team there on ground to just tell us the whole importance, 3 days conference of Maisha conference, matters ending HIV and AIDS. How is it going? From matters health to matters climate change now. And the World Animal Protection is scheduled to hold a pre-Africa Climate Summit themed towards humane, sustainable, regenerative and climate-friendly livestock production systems. The chief guest for the breakfast session will be the climate change envoy, Ambassador Ali Mohammed. And now to days that you probably did not know exist. Today is the International Day for People of African Descent. Well, yes, that includes you, Fred Indemoli.
Oh, yes. Proudly African.
Today is the International Day for People of African Descent, and it will be commemorated for the 3rd time today. It began 2 years ago. So through this observance, the United Nations aims to promote the extraordinary contributions of the African diaspora around the world and to eliminate all forms of discrimination against people of African descent. And this is another day today. Today marks the International Overdose Awareness Day. So the theme for this year is remembering those who go Unseen, which seeks to highlight one of the major obstacles in ending overdose. Before I actually get into Today in History, today is also the day for African traditional medicine. I'm curious, are you one of those people who just straight go to in traditional medicine?
Well, I know of two herbs. There's one my mom calls mogoanogo, and there's one that we've used before called mwarobaini. Beyond that, there's nothing else I know.
Aloe vera?
That's the one. That's the one I think mogoanogo.
Oh, aloe vera works magic. you either eat it, you boil it in water. Definitely, aloe vera works magic.
Okay.
And today in history, back in 1997, today marks 25 years since the death of Princess Diana. Diana died at age 36 on August 31st, 1997, of injuries sustained in a car crash in Paris, which also killed her companion, Dodi Fayed, and driver Henry Paul. That is on today's highlights. And today in history, we'll be updating this particular diary as the show progresses on. Now to the papers this morning.
Oh, yes. And on the front page of the Standard this morning, the big headline there, DJ Evolve, Why Babu Was Freed. An 18-page deal with DJ, witnesses who recanted evidence, questions without answers, sheer or deliberate negligence. All these were at play as Embakasi MP cleared of the shooting of DJ Evolve at a Nairobi club on January 17th, 2020. The story has been extensively covered on the pages 2 and 3 of the Standard. Surprisingly, the said Felix Orinda, who was expected to be a key witness for the state, was not a prosecution witness. It's according to the magistrate, Bernard Ochoi, and that's a big headline on the Standard today. The other story that has been given prominence on the front page of the Standard this morning, deal, Azimio Kenya Kwanza drew rules for national talks. Rival political formations sign agreement outlining dialogue committee's approach to engaging stakeholders, collecting public views and use of expert resources. However, be warned, some sessions may be conducted behind closed doors. Interesting. That's so the story is on page 6. On the right-hand side of the front page of the Standard this morning, Senate ejects Eldoret Jobs Agency boss. First Choice Recruitment Agency Director Judy Jebchirchir kicked out after refusing to apologize for accusing Parliament of bias. The story is on page 20. Matters to do with weather as well. On page 4, El Nino coming, be ready, warns the weatherman. I don't know if you remember the El Nino back in the 90s. Of course you can.
You really just said it. But then there was the...
It will be your very first time to experience this phenomenon.
There was another one in early 2000.
I think that was La Nina.
Oh, okay.
The opposite.
Okay.
So this one you'll be seeing it for the very first time. Well, something more, it's once in a blue moon. You remember that, that conversation? Yeah, so yeah, El Nino coming, be ready, warns the weatherman.
And I'm actually anticipating how, even as a country, we will be tapping into this. We normally see heavy rainfall in most ASL areas, arid and semi-arid lands, but then now actually tapping into this water becomes a whole other story. So it's going to be interesting. Yesterday, but then we had the CEO of National Irrigation Authority, and talking largely about the same.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
So how to harvest the water that will come with El Nino rains.
Oh yes, and even the government's plan to build more dams, 100 dams, the government says. Is it an ambitious plan? Wait to see how that will be.
Interesting. Okay. That story is on page 4 of the Standard. On the top strip of the Standard this morning, cartels, defiant president insists on 3 options. Mambo ni tatu. The story is extensively covered on pages 14 and 15 of the Standard. Another story highlighted there on the top strip, Joho's farm suffers yet another blow. On the international scene, Gabon coup ends Bongo family rule. And in sports, steeplechase.
So in Kenya, how we say normally reggae mezimo. In Gabon, the saying.
Interestingly, if you go through the conversations online, They say they've ended the Bongo family rule, but it would appear that even this guy who's been appointed as a transitional president, there are some who claim is actually a relative.
Oh.
Probably a distant cousin of Ali Bongo, so it's still within the family. In sports, steeplechase stars renew rivalry, and that is the big story on the sports pages of The Standard this morning.
Right, from The Standard, let's scroll with you on the Daily Nation. And also, the top strips of The Standard also reflect on the Daily Nation. Matters Joho Farm dealt blow in court battle with KP over new tariffs. And also Gabon coup leaders place Bongo under house arrest. Rebel officers seize power after disputed polls. Extensive on page 32, that is on the top strip of the Daily Nation. Now let's scroll below with you. Ruto Raila strike common ground. That is on the big story for Daily Nation. Bipartisan talks, but the committee says its final report will include a list of the contested issues. So it is a whole give and take, as Daily Nation puts it. The National Dialogue Committee yesterday agreed to discuss all agenda items proposed by both the ruling Kenya Kwanza Alliance and Azimio la Umoja One Kenya. A major breakthrough in the planned negotiations. This includes Azimio's demands on the cost of living and the audit of the 2022 elections, as well as the government's proposal on the offices of official opposition leader and prime cabinet secretary. You can dig your head into that on page 4 and skim through, read through, and even take notes. That is on matters of politics. On the left side, matters graft really bear the big picture there. On graft, Kindiki cracks down on immigration cartels. So yesterday did see detectives arresting 4 suspects in the ongoing crackdown on corrupt officials at the immigration department. We were having this discussion a day ago, talking about what should really be done in that particular immigration department and the whole incessant passport delays. Speaking of matters, passports, below there, tales of woe from the victims of first choice jobs racket. The victims who were drawn from Trans Nzoia, Nakuru, Uasin Gishu, and Elgeyo Marakwet claimed that they were promised lucrative job opportunities in Qatar during the World Cup. That is on page 2. Now in matters sports, Budapest 2023, Kenya's good, bad, and ugly. Now in winning a total of 10 medals, that is 3 gold, 3 silver, and 4 bronze to finish 5th overall. But first among African countries at the 2023 World Athletics Championships in Budapest, Kenya slightly improved on her performance in last year's edition of the championships held in Oregon, USA. And I'm actually curious about it right now. And even when Faith was really trending, people are saying now it is a high time to have a road named after her, somewhere in Nairobi, or even a street. Okay. Faith Kipyegon Street. I just really feel proud of ourselves. But then speak about matters being proud. Can see politics and the whole talks are really on a number of pages. Taifa Leo as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I've just seen something online, and this probably to be nice to mention, because we had mentioned about Flora Limuki not being with us today, and she is bereaved, and we'd like just to take this opportunity to send our condolences. She's lost a very close family member, and our hearts go out to her. That's so good. Flora, we are with you, and we're praying for you as well.
Oh, yes.
Back to the dailies this morning, and yes, you're talking about Taifa Leo, and on Taifa Leo, mwanzo mpya, that's a big headline on Taifa Leo, baada ya vuta ni kuvute kati ya Azimio na Kenya Kwanza, hatimaye kamati yaafikiana kuhusu agenda. That's the main story on the talks. And kiongozi wa Wiper Kalonzo Musyoka na kiongozi wa wengi bungeni Kimani Ichung'wah wabadilisha nakala za maafikiano kuhusu mikutano ya mazungumzo. Other stories being highlighted on the front page of Taifa Leo: gavana atoroka wakazi kwenye hasira kikaoni. Wakazi wa Kiambu washtumu gavana wao kwa kutelekeza jukumu la MCA kwa kugawa hundi za basari. Or rather kutekeleza. He was handing out checks, bursary checks, and they're saying that should be done by MCAs instead. Mtego wa KRA kuanza kunasa wa uzaji lagai leo. Wafanyabiashara sasa watahitajika kuwa na sajili ya kielektroniki kuhusu ushuru ETR inayorekodi shughuli zote za kibiashara. Kwingineko, India yaajiri watu kufukuza tumbili mkutano mkuu. Wanaume hao watatimua tumbili wasiharibu maua kwenye mkutano wa viongozi wa nchi 20 tajiri ulimwenguni G20. Wow. Interesting.
Right.
And on the top strip of Taifa Leo, wimbi la mapinduzi lazidi kuvuma Afrika, mtutu wa bunduki ukielekezwa Gabon. Mapinduzi ya kijeshi yaendelea kushuhudiwa barani Afrika baada ya majeshi nchini Gabon kutoa uongozi na kufutilia mbali matokeo ya uchaguzi yaliyoshuhudia Rais Ali Bongo akitangazwa mshindi. Mapinduzi mengine ya kijeshi yalitokea Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, Guinea, Chad na Sudan.
Right, and from Taifa Leo, let's get into the Business Daily. Business Daily this morning. So how September taxes will hit farms, consumers. Remember, September begins tomorrow, literally. 6 tax measures kick in Friday, today. So this include digital assets tax, 3%, 17.5% exports levy on export levy on imported iron, and can't get the other one quite clearly. 10% export levy on imported sacks and bags. Right, I can definitely skim through all that. I mean, the kind of expected taxes that you are going to be paying as of tomorrow, which is next month. On the right strip of Business Daily, National Oil eyes 5 billion Kenyan shillings from investor in fuel stations deal. So the National Oil Corporations, that is NOC, is saying at least 5 billion from the state-backed turnaround deal, the deal that will see it secure an investor to run its more than 100 petrol stations. And the Jubilee Holdings doubles its interim dividend to 145 million shillings. That is on the left strip of Business Daily, that is banking. Kenya banks lending to parent firms abroad up 61%. That is on Business Daily. From the BD to the PD.
Yes, on the People Daily today, I have it here. On the People Daily this morning, the big headline: IEBC top agenda for Bomas talks. 5 key issues agreed on. Cost of living will form part of the talks. A victory for Raila and allies. 2/3 gender rule will also be discussed. A win for women. CDF to be considered for inclusion in constitution, giving boost to MPs. Office of Prime Minister and leader of official opposition to be entrenched. Electoral justice to be included. These are just some of the agreements that were ratified and the document signed yesterday. The story is on page 4 of the People Daily. At the bottom of the People Daily, a nice photo of a Chief Justice dancing with some Turkana dancers. Chief Justice Martha Koome joins traditional dancers in a celebratory jig at the Turkana County headquarters ahead of launch of e-filing and an alternative justice system suite at the Lodwar Law Courts yesterday. On the top strip of the People Daily this morning, 2 stories. Kenya to host 24 heads of state for climate talks. And there are various, quite a number of reports on pages 5, 9 and 14 of the People Daily. We expect these talks to kick off next week, and so quite a number, over 30,000 delegates expected to troop into Nairobi. And of course, the other big story internationally, Ali Bongo overthrown just after Gabon poll victory, and the story is on page 20. And we will continue talking about the happenings in Gabon.
Right, from People, do you have the star before you cross the borders?
I know I don't have the star, so we could just as well cross borders into
Uganda?
Uganda.
Right. And in Uganda, and the top strip of, that is the Daily Monitor, you can see there Bobby Wine biting his lip there, looking up in the skies, looking like quite a frustrated face. And he says, don't support General Muhoozi Kaineruvaga as the president's son. The presidential bid, says Bobby. So NUP leader Robert Chagutanyi sent, okay, can't get that. Okay, Bobby Wine says first son General Muhoozi Kaineruvaga is not fit to be president, adding that Uganda is not a monarchy. That is on page 6. Technically, this is Bobby Wine trying to avoid what is happening in Gabon. And into matters, quotes, Kayihura walks to his freedom. Free at last, General Court Martial gives former police boss what critics say his regime failed to give many government opponents. Can read through that on page 4 and 5. That is on the Daily Monitor.
Okay, we cross over into Tanzania now and we look at the Mwananchi. Mwananchi this morning has chosen this headline, ni mabadiliko ya kimkakati. Rais Samia apangua baraza la mawaziri akiguza wizara nyeti na za kimkakati kwenye serikali yake. Ni mabadiliko makubwa kuwahi kufanyika tangu aingie Ikulu mwaka wa 2021. Afuata nyayo za Rais Mwinyi akimteua Daktari Biteko kuwa naibu waziri mkuu. Silaha mnyeti wachomoza, wachambuzi wazungumza sababu ya mabadiliko. Kwa nini cheo cha naibu waziri mkuu? Talking about cabinet reshuffle in Tanzania. Idadi ya wafanyakazi wasiojua kuwa kufanya baada ya kustaafu ya paa. Well, sometimes you go through the papers in Tanzania and you really have to sit down and think about what exactly they're talking about. Okay. But at least they're talking about a cabinet reshuffle effected yesterday by President Suluhu Hassan. And that's a big headline on the Mwananchi in Tanzania.
Oh, yes.
We have another paper from there.
The Citizen. And even as I scroll to the Citizen, really, again, it's always as if, same scripts, what happens in Kenya, also mostly reflects in Tanzania. And on the Citizen this morning, they ask, what difference are they going to make? So all eyes are on the latest cabinet reshuffle after the president appointed Tanzania's only third deputy prime minister, splits a ministry into two, and lets go of some familiar names. And even after President William Ruto had the right to act to the cabinet, some of those two words, cabinet reshuffle, was quite prominent.
Yes.
But then, was it yesterday morning, we did see, when he chaired the cabinet meeting at Kakamega State Lodge, and all of them were there. So,
no one would dare miss that.
Oh, you can. I mean, Moses Kuri himself, yes.
He had to take a motorbike.
Oh, yes, saying really has to be that,
He had to ride Nduthi.
Well, the optics of that is something interesting. So yeah, you definitely can see the dropped ministers there. Dr. Angeline Mabula, Mary Masanja, Atupele Mwakibete. And read through that and get to see how different cabinet reshuffle in Tanzania can be in Kenya. What kind of notes can Kenya take on a cabinet reshuffle in Tanzania? And from the Citizen and from Tanzania, we come back home.
Maswala ya karakacha.
Maswala ya karakacha on page
17 of both, 17 of the Daily Nation and 16 of the Standard.
Standard goes with some international news this morning. I'll be telling you what that is about in a few, but on page 17 of the Daily Nation, what we were talking about yesterday, and a big story yesterday, and even a question yesterday, what do you really think about the police uniforms? So there's the ABC different kinds of police uniforms, the new police uniform proposals. NB kind of seem, I think A and B are the new ones, the short-sleeved, either short-sleeved and also long-sleeved, with a number of recommendations and changes put into it, and also with the tag to be embedded so that even a police officer can't really remove it. And then you have C, which C interestingly has imprints of
a handshake.
A handshake, yeah.
I don't know exactly what that means.
And there's someone there wearing a mask, having ratings. It's quite interesting, this one. What kind of a uniform C is?
They could be talking about the handshake and whether or not it contributed to the change in uniforms as well. Yet again, that could also mean something that happens within our police service and matters handshake and other issues that we do not want to accuse them of this morning.
Right, and speak of matters accusing each other, can see the frail Gabon president, Ali Bongo, there, crying, seemingly crying, and some tight hands, coup d'etat, probably the hands of the Gabon soldiers. Wait, am I not supposed to break my father's record? The father hit how many years?
42 years as president.
42 years.
Yes.
And he's now 14.
Only a third.
Yeah. He's like, come on, guys. At least let me also break my father's record. And yesterday, by the way, even the video that he had, released, saying, let's make noise, so that even other countries can, come in to chip. So far, a number of European countries have come out to criticize what is happening in Gabon, saying, America saying they're following closely, and they condemn Britain, saying they're condemning this. Also France saying, they're condemning.
The United Nations as well.
Yeah, the United Nations saying they're watching closely and seeing how this is going to be. For them, again, they were just, condemning and following closely in Niger, but then again, it overflowed into Gabon. So it's going to be interesting how this is going to play out.
Yes. Na hapo ndio kwenye masuala ya karakacha leo. So yes, new police uniform proposals on the Daily Nation, and what's happening in Gabon on the Standard. And I think probably I'll go with the Standard today. It's a bigger discussion, and because everyone is asking if this trend could actually stretch to other parts of the continent, not necessarily towards our direction, but whichever direction it takes, because it is a trend that is growing.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And even now speaks on the strength of ECOWAS. Is it just a toothless dog?
Well, they issued a number of threats that will never materialize in the Niger case, so we wait to see if at all they're going to pronounce themselves on this matter as well.
All right. And speaking of matters pronouncing themselves, the church have pronounced themselves, and they've said we do want to regulate ourselves, giving matters their code of ethics there, and really forms our question of the day, where we ask you, should the government let churches regulate themselves? Should the government let the churches regulate themselves? Our social media handles just below your screens, TV47 News, that is on X, at TV47 Kenya on Facebook. You can definitely talk to us and tell us, what do you think on this particular matter? I'll be taking a look at your feedback as we continue.
Yes, just after the break, we'll be hosting Gitonga Mukunji, MP Manyata, Rafael Obonyo, public policy analyst, and we're hoping that Robert Alai, MCA Kileleshwa Ward, will manage to make his way to the studio this morning. That is our panel as we discuss a lot of issues, including what's happening in Gabon, as well as the talks right here in Kenya. Don't go away. You're watching Morning Cafe.
Katika kipindi
Morning. Pleasure to be back here, Fred.
It's always good to have you in studio. Before we even get to any other details or other discussions that are happening in Kenya, of course, there's what is happening in the continent, elsewhere on the continent, and specifically Gabon, with the coup there. And yesterday we saw the end of an era. The Bongo family finally ousted from power in Gabon after 56 years. Yes. Omar Bongo, who died in 2009, had served as president for 42 years. Then we saw Ali Bongo, who succeeded his father, 14 years later being deposed. The military there has appointed a transitional leader from the military who served as a former aide-de-camp to President Omar Bongo, who died in 2009. It's always someone very close.
Very close,
and
yeah.
He also served as the head of the Gabon Republican Guard, which was charged with guarding the president, his family, and other dignitaries. And
That's an insider, you know.
it's always an insider.
An insider, yeah.
But the kind of trend we're seeing in that region speaks a lot about the awakening, if we may call it that.
Yeah.
I don't know what your analysis will be. Is it really an awakening? Or are we going back to the dark ages where military coups were the norm?
I think for me it's more of a reawakening that the populace, people are tired of leadership that is not transparent, leadership that is not accountable, leadership that is manipulative, leaders who do not want to respect the tenets of democracy, you know. And so people are getting tired. And while people were helpless in a way, if they went on the street, they would be shot. If they raised their concerns and voices, no one would listen. The military now are stepping in because they are also part of the society. They are also part of these communities, and they see what is happening. And so they are stepping in and saying, look, we are not going to allow this to happen. So it's more or less military, unlike the initial coups. It's more or less military aligning themselves to the desires and aspirations of the people. And you can see that by the number of people who are pouring on the streets. That never used to happen with the initial coups. You didn't see these numbers of people. Yeah. We saw it in Mali, we saw it in Burkina Faso, we saw it in Niger the other time when the military took over. Guys were on the streets chanting and praising the military. So it's more, in my view, it's military enabling the people. Whether that is a good thing or bad, I think it's yet to be seen, in the sense that all of us abhor the military rule. Yeah. So in the short term, it looks like a stopgap measure, but it might not be the model of governance that we want to pick up.
What does it say about democracy, where the will of the people is exercised through the ballot and the majority have their say? When we see a trend where the military is deciding to take charge of not just one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 countries in one region of the continent, because there's always been the argument that the notion of democracy does not really work best in our African situation. I don't know, is it time for us to relook at the system of governance?
I think it's late, actually. We should have done that yesterday, that we should have looked at what model of governance works for us. Democracy, like it has been said, you know, it's a model. It's not the best model, but it's the best that we have now. But of course, we've seen that it's not working and functioning properly within the African setting. And so African countries or the continent should have thought increasingly on how do we better democracy, or how do we improve democracy to work for us. That is one. But two, also, democracy has been manipulated in this part of the world. So election is not election. So election, you know, it's that thing they say, it's not people who vote, it's people who count the votes that count, you know. So how do we make sure that democracy is really, reflects and actually props the wishes of the people? We've seen in many countries, even recently, whether you're talking about Nigeria that had elections just recently, whether you're talking about Sierra Leone that just had their elections recently, whether you're talking about our own country, Kenya, there are always concerns about, elections were not free fair, and verifiable. So for democracy to be a model that people are going to embrace fully, we have to make sure that it is, elections in particular, is free and fair. We cannot have a situation like what we've seen in Gabon, where one family is ruling for, I mean, over 60 years, almost 60 years. It's unacceptable. I mean, even if we were to talk about democracy. So I think for as long as democracy is seen not to be reflecting and anchoring the will and the wishes of the people, the majority in that case, then people will continue to protest, and we are going to see more of military stepping in and stepping up. And even governance, if you're not going to have accountable, transparent and accountable leadership, like what we've seen in parts of Africa, West Africa in particular is a good reflection. Rich countries, rich region, but poor governance. So a majority of people are poor, yet leaders continue to amass more and more wealth. People are going to protest, and people are going to seek other ways of toppling these regimes.
Because you look at the trend, and even from Zimbabwe, Mugabe had to be forcefully removed. Yes, now they've just come through an election that is also disputed. Then it raises questions about what is happening in other areas. Republic of Congo, Sassou Nguesso is still there, years on end.
Yeah.
Cameroon, Paul Biya is still there, even after 90. And come even closer home. And we're looking at the front page of the Daily Monitor in Uganda, and one of the opposition leaders, Bobi Wine, is urging Ugandans not to support Museveni's son Kainerugaba for the presidency.
Yeah.
The discussion seems to be around the same thing, that probably there's a lot of mistrust in electoral processes around the continent, and probably this issue of a son succeeding the father could be something that we'll still experience probably even in Uganda.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and people are saying, look, we do not want kings who are handing over powers to their lineage or clansmen and women. Truly, we want to elect our leaders. And so if you're manipulating processes, or if you're using terror and other means to, you know, have your son or daughter take over power, then we are not going to allow that. And this has been seen all over where people have really gone out and said we won't allow that. You saw in Liberia, Salif had appointed one of her daughters into a prime ministry. We've seen it, you've seen in Uganda, where Museveni is appointing a family member into a prime ministry. We've seen in Rwanda, you know, things like that. People are getting tired of those kind of things, and they're beginning to believe that this is not democracy. We are actually enriching families, and that we cannot allow to happen. So unless leaders start thinking beyond their families and start looking at the community as a whole, then we will continue seeing more and more of this. But another thing that I think is coming out, Fred, for me, is the issue of that loyalty is not sustainable. Relying on loyalty as a model of governance is not sustainable, you know. So you need to do a lot more, you know, be professional, ensure there's accountability, ensure there's transparency, and ensure there's fairness. So this thing of relying on a few people whom you think are your loyalists is very, very, very dangerous. And so leaders, I think, they more than anything, the awakening should be about how do I ensure that there is fairness? How do I ensure that there's professionalism in what I do? How do I ensure that people feel there is accountability and good leadership? If we don't do that, then we'll continue seeing this uprising and to the leadership. And then they're also seeing what is happening, and they're saying, no, even if you're close to you, we're not going to allow this to happen. So loyalty as a model, I think, has an expiry date, and seems like the expiry date has now arrived in Africa. And
I'm looking at another instance of where one person has served for over 40 years is in Equatorial Guinea, where Teodoro Obiang Nguema, so is still president since 1979. I think probably is the longest serving.
He's the longest serving, yeah. And if you look at Cameroon, Biya has never been in the country. He's serving, but he's out of the country. He's in France, and so he's actually leading by remote control, you know.
Yet there's this connection between francophone countries in Africa. And this is where it would appear a lot of these things are happening. Are we saying that the English-speaking African countries are immune from this, that it's something probably related to their links to France?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because, I mean, first, it is yes and no. Yes, in the sense that France never left the continent. It has never, it's been there, you know. You've seen countries like even Gabon being forced to use the French currency, you know, as a denomination. You've seen most of the wealth within the region is being exported and benefiting these foreign countries who colonized these countries, and France has been accused of that, and so true, France didn't leave. But this is not just an experience that you will find in France or countries that were colonized by French. You will also find that even the British countries that were colonized by the British are experiencing similar challenges in terms of corruption, in terms of having wealth, being rich, but poor in governance. So it's more about poor governance more than who colonized them. And so with time, it's going to catch up with these other countries that were not necessarily colonized by the French. The saddest thing is that it's also exposing the soft belly of and the weakness of regional bodies like ECOWAS and AU. They look so helpless, like they can't do anything, you know. And so who is going to save us out?
They also cannot guarantee that democracy in areas where it appears like it's working will be guaranteed, like places like in East Africa, in Tanzania, in Kenya here. If at all the ECOWAS and the AU are so helpless when it comes to issues there, does it mean that even our own democracy, or because we pride ourselves of having or being a bit better than the rest in this part of the world, should we be threatened or should we be concerned by what we're seeing in other areas of the continent?
Certainly, and people are increasingly giving up on this model of governance called democracy because it's not working for the people, in the sense that it is not representing the will and the aspirations of the people. So unless and until we improve and strengthen democracy the way it should be, or even better, then we should be concerned and we should feel threatened. But on AU and these regional bodies, the problem is that they were on the touchlines. They were just standing and watching while populace across the continent were suffering because of poor democracy or poor leadership for that matter. So they didn't do anything then, and this is now catching up. So they are paying for sins of inactiveness when they were supposed to have stepped in.
In Kenya, we are doing something right, at least even with the promulgation of the Constitution 13 years on, and that is one of the big discussion points this week. It would appear that at least we are having those discussions in issues of inclusivity, issues to do with governance. Is that one way of ensuring that democracy is entrenched and probably promoting that system of governance? Do you think that that has been our saving grace, the fact that we keep talking and discussing these issues?
Extremely important, and election alone is not enough. You know, Africa has been priding, and Kenya, for example, is one of those countries that have been holding regular elections. But elections alone are not enough.
Elections could actually be part of the problem.
Exactly, because people say we vote too much. We have elections too often. So that is just one element that we need to improve. But there are other elements that we also need to improve, like our system of governance. We must ensure, like you rightly put it, ensure inclusivity, ensure that everyone feels that they belong, they are part and parcel of this country. You must ensure that you incorporate the views and the perspectives of people in leadership. You know, you cannot just listen to, for example, people who voted for you. You have to listen to other people. You cannot just listen to people you like or engage and interact with people you like. You have to listen to everyone. You cannot just have development in some parts of the country and not other parts of the country, like have been seen in some parts of Africa. So unless we do this kind of initiatives that ensure that we improve our governance, then we will continue feeling threatened. And Kenya has done well, give it to us. Beyond elections, there have been constant engagement on how do we improve leadership, how do we ensure that everyone feels they belong, and even the process that we are having now, this bipartisan talks and dialogues. I think it's a good way to ask ourselves, which area do we need to improve together? We need some sort of a common ground so that we move together as a country. Our constitution, the promulgation of the constitution, a good thing. How do we improve this constitution so that it serves the needs and concerns of the people today and in the future? And after some time, we ask ourselves again, what is not working? How can we improve this? This is important. If you look at most West African countries, they're still operating on very old constitution that has become almost obsolete. They're still relying on just a few members of some family ruling and governing, and people don't feel included. People don't feel they belong, and that is why you see a lot of protests. So Kenya, I think we are on the right path, but we need to stick there and do more and do better.
You must have watched that video by the deposed leader Ali Bongo from his residence, talking to camera and saying, asking people to make noise. And it brought out the issue of how disconnected some of these leaders are, that he believed that there are people out there, probably even Gabonese people, who would make noise for his salvation. Just how disconnected some of these African leaders are.
I mean, they definitely are. You know, power, there's a way power blinds people, because power provides you with some cover, leges, and some sort of protection that you don't see the reality out there. And so most of these leaders are in some sort of a bubble. And when this bubble is busted, that's when they realize, oh, it's cold outside. Oh, it's been this hot outside. You remember that story of these people who were protesting, and they went to the palace, and they were hungry. And the queen was like, why don't we find some queen cakes for them? So you see, they're like that. They don't realize the pain and the suffering of the people until it reaches them themselves. If you looked at that video, listened to it, I mean, the former president of Gabon now is saying that, look, they've arrested me, they put me under house arrest and arrested my family. He's not even saying they've arrested anyone else, me and my family. So it's always about them. And so unless and until leaders start looking beyond them and realizing the people are equally important, then we will continue having these kind of situations. But yes, power really blinds them, and they don't get to know or see the realities on the ground. You've heard people joking about our politicians, the way they tint their cars. So they don't see potholes, they don't know what is happening outside, until maybe someone takes away that tint, then they realize, oh, this is how it looks outside. So it is very, very important for leaders to interact with people, feel their pain, and find ways of addressing that. If you don't do that, then we'll end up with situations like what we've seen in Gabon.
Interesting. And of course, what is happening in Gabon and other areas of the continent will continue making headlines. The Gabonese military has appointed a transitional leader as president following the deposing of Ali Bongo as president. After the break, we'll come back home and discuss about what is headlining here. The statement of issues for the national negotiation by the National Dialogue Committee. In particular, they have 5 issues that they'll be talking about, and we'll be looking at that as well as other issues that may involve a change in the provisions of our laws, even as we continue marking 13 years since the promulgation of the Constitution. You're watching Morning Cafe. Let's take a break. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Indimuli. And just before we get back to the discussion, a quick look at our top story this morning. For the first time in Kenya's history, churches have moved to self-regulate as the government undertakes a crackdown against rogue preachers and institutions. The latest move comes hot on the heels of the Shakahola massacre that has so far claimed 429 lives. Religious leaders, lawyers and human rights groups led by EACC chairperson Bishop David Oginde on Wednesday launched the Code of Conduct and Governance Guidelines for the Church in Kenya. The move is seen as a bid to counter impending state-imposed regulations on religious institutions. A 12-member steering committee chaired by Bishop Oginde drafted the rules. And today we ask, should the government let the churches regulate themselves? Should the government let the churches regulate themselves? We'll be looking at some of your comments as we continue this broadcast. Remember, you can share your sentiments or your answers to that question at TV47 News on X and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. Just before the break, we were talking about issues making headlines across the continent, especially with the coup in Gabon. But now we want to come back home and discuss the headlines here. And today we have Raphael Obonyo, public policy analyst, and introducing onto the panel now, Honorable Mukunji Gitonga, MP Manyata constituency. Good morning, karibu sana.
Asante, Fred.
And you're right on time for this discussion.
This is the right time.
Yes, it is what is headlining on the dailies this morning and on the Daily Nation. Ruto, Raila strike common ground. Give and take, the National Dialogue Committee yesterday agreed to discuss all agenda items proposed by both the ruling Kenya Kwanza Alliance and Azimio la Umoja One Kenya, a major breakthrough in the planned negotiations. These includes Azimio's demands on the cost of living and audit of the 2022 elections, as well as the government's proposals on the office of official leader and prime cabinet secretary. On the Standard, it also features on the front page, deal Azimio Kenya Kwanza draw rules for national talks. On the People Daily as well, IEBC top agenda for Bomas talks. 5 key issues agreed on: cost of living, a victory for Raila and allies, 2/3 gender rule, a win for women, CDF to be considered for inclusion, giving a boost or a win for the MPs, office of prime CS and leader of official opposition to be entrenched, electoral justice also included. Now, gentlemen, that haggling and back and forth over what exactly should be discussed at the Bomas talks has been a huge talking point. Now that they've finally agreed, because initially I think they were saying these are just talks for the sake of it. Let's get to the table, we'll decide what to talk about once we get there. But the fact that they've agreed on all the agenda items that both parties proposed, that indeed is a major breakthrough. Honorable Mukunji.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fred, for having me. And I want to congratulate TV47 for this good work. I think you guys are...
On behalf of TV47, I say thank you.
And I also want to say hi to my viewers, especially from my constituency, in Manyata constituency, Embu, and all the viewers around the country. Coming to your question, Fred, I think, let me say that I have been following these issues from when we used to have chaos in the country through Maandamanos. And I feel like we even wasted a lot of time. This was very easy to achieve. If at all the dialogue we were talking about was these issues that are here, which are issues that are going to be discussed about. And I feel, I know it looks like the opposition took the long route to get the government on the table. They took the long route. And they also took the wrong route, because many people have lost businesses, many people lost their lives. There was a lot of destabilization of the economy. But all the same, we are here. One thing I'm happy about the talks is they are happening in the right place. All these, we have our friend, majority leader on our side, and Kalonzo Musyoka. So it means that in the precincts of the talks, they are actually in the legislative arm of government, leaving the president and his cabinet and PSs and his ministries to do the hard work that Kenyans give them.
Okay.
And we in Parliament, me included, we are eagerly waiting to actually get the recommendations of this committee that was formed. One of the things that I feel will be of importance is to hear the ideas the opposition had on issues to do with reducing the cost of living. Mm-hmm. Is it more viable than what the government is doing right now? We want also to hear what is the most important thing that they are putting on the table in terms of the audit of elections of last year. But let me say, this is the right route, and these conversations are conversations that are not supposed to happen after people have died. They should be continuous, and there were institutions set up by the 2010 Constitution that were to handle issues to do with dialogue, reconciliation, and issues to do with ensuring there's a continuous debate on what goes on.
But one thing that will definitely excite you and your colleagues in the National Assembly is the issue of CDF.
Yes.
That it will, as a direct result of these talks, it could end up being entrenched in the Constitution. This is something that members of Parliament have been clamoring for.
Fred, let me tell you, when I saw that being part of the talks, I was shocked, because this is an initiative that has already been debated in the National Assembly. It got support from both sides of the House, and I feel it's a route to make sure that we have put matter on the talks, because there is also a team which has advancedly worked to see how we can have a law entrenching NGCDF and GAF in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And well, it's okay to discuss it, and you cannot say no to discussions. But I feel all the same, because everything will still come back to the House.
Okay.
Basically, from what I can see, there is a line to change the Constitution. It is leading to that.
Yes.
What I feel is that while we are changing the Constitution, we should not have any interruption in what is going on in government. Let everybody work. Let there not be disruptions of businesses, so that it is our work as legislators to work on issues Constitution. Okay. There are only two routes given by the Constitution 2010 on how we can change a Constitution.
And on that, I want to bring
and also through the public.
And I want to bring Raphael into this conversation on that discussion now, because yes, this week we're also marking 13 years after the promulgation of the Constitution, and the talk about a possible amendment to the Constitution is rife. And we've seen both what is happening in Parliament, and also a group of eminent persons also came out and said they will be pushing for popular initiative to amend the Constitution. Yet what we can hear, even from the Honourable MP here, is it would appear that the belief within the National Assembly is that this all these changes, if at all they will happen, it is within the mandate of the National Assembly to effect all this. The understanding is that we are yet to exercise any proper amendment. Actually, we are yet to effect any amendment to the Constitution as yet. So that bit is yet to be tested. All attempts, whether popular or through Parliament, have been defeated. So none can be sure that either route, whether popular initiative or parliamentary route, will work. Yes.
Yeah, I think first of all is to say that it is a great thing that the adversaries, I mean the various political formation, most importantly Kenya Kwanza and Azimio, have been persuaded to find some sort of a common ground on these issues. Of course, they've picked five issues as a priority, but of course there could be, and there are many more issues. But some of those, I mean, the 5 issues I think are important. If you look at the issue of having the opposition play a more critical role in terms of holding the government accountable, it is important. The new office that was created of Prime CS to help coordinate government business is important. Two-third gender rule are all very, very the content will be more in the discussion, and I agree with Honorable Mukunji here when he says that we want to see and hear, because it's one thing to set the agenda, but it is another thing to hear. What is it that they're putting on the table? Is it something that only favors them as politicians or a particular political formation? That is very, very important. And that's why I do not agree with the idea of some of the sessions being done in camera, because all these issues affect the public. And we really want to, public wants to engage, wants to hear. You don't want to hear that they discuss something that is not helpful to the people. So these 5 agendas, I think all the discussions and the dialogue should happen in public. Let us hear what everyone is putting on the table. I think for me that would be very, very
And that is the biggest concern, Honorable Mukunji, because listening to you, you talk about how Parliament, this will come back to Parliament and will be done with it. Yet there are concerns that that kind of talk is locking out the rest of the country. In matters to do with the possible amendment to the Constitution. That this document, we collectively worked on it, that 13 years ago, it was not just Parliament that was left to come up with these issues. Leaving an issue as big as constitutional amendment for the very first time to the National Assembly is not really what we envisaged as a country.
Let me say this, Fred. We need to also be logical in this country, you know, and I believe that we did not make a constitution that is going to remain that way forever. We have changing technologies, we have changing issues, we have new threats. We need always to be looking at ways to accommodate that to what we do every day. And I would say this, that many countries always involve the issues of change together with the laws they bring in place. The constitutional change that is happening today, being the first time, I believe it should also be all-inclusive. People, there should be a way of ensuring that people, recommendations are well taken care of. One of the mistakes that the Constitution 2010 did, it was a reactive constitution. It was happening because something happened, but then we don't want it to happen again. And that also brought the issue of also over-promising and ensuring that we have a huge government, that even today, the taxpayers are feeling the heat of it. The fact of the matter is, the 47 counties, the 290 constituencies, the, I don't know, 1,000 wards, all those things have put a lot of pressure.
Do you think, for example, that that is part of the conversation we should be having, reducing
that's what I'm saying.
The size of government?
I'm just telling you, if at all I get a chance to do my contribution to this committee, what I will tell them. And we also have a big challenge with even our growing youth population, which has been left to languish in poverty. And it's also something that is a huge asset for this country that is not being used. All these things, now is the time to put an economic amendment to the Constitution. We looked more of social balancing when we were dealing the 2010 Constitution. Now we need to think about the next level that is supposed to be an economic amendment to the Constitution, and that allows this country also to breathe. And when I say this, I'm saying this also appreciating the issue of entrenchment of the NGCDF and the GAF funds. That is an economic change. And we can ride on that and ensure that we have an accommodation of so many other things that are going to help this country.
Raphael, do you agree with that, that probably we were a bit over-ambitious, we set the bar too high, that there are things we put in the Constitution that we have no way of achieving because some of them are here, the 2/3 gender rule is here, yet 13 years later, it has never been implemented. There are other issues like dilution of Chapter 6 of the Constitution, which we keep talking about, on leadership and integrity. We've never been able to achieve those things, that we were just being over-ambitious. Some of these things, we should just remove them from our laws.
I mean, first is to say that there's nothing wrong with ambition, but someone once said that too much ambition breaks a man, and too little takes you nowhere. So I think we really need to be realistic and ask ourselves, what can we achieve within the parameters that have been set, and based on what we have in terms of resources. If you look at what is happening now, you've realized, I mean, we've been told part of the challenge that we have is, of course, overborrowing, but the other big challenge is that we have a huge wage bill, and that means that there's very little money that is left for development. So I think we really need to be realistic, and I agree with Honorable Mukunji here that, look, we need to ask ourselves I mean, we had these aspirations, we had this ambition, but what can work? And I don't think people are against review of the Constitution. I think what people are against is review of the Constitution in a way that does not benefit the people, in a way that only benefits a section of the people, and in some cases, and in most cases, a few politicians. So that is what people are averse to.
Yet that's the kind of discussion we're seeing here. Creation of Office of Leader of Official Opposition. Nothing, we're not reducing it. Well, creation of the position of Prime Cabinet Secretary that were never there in the Constitution. We are not looking to reduce anything.
As a young parliamentarian, Fred, I'll tell you, there are things that are not going I will not allow my members to pass some things there. You know, let's agree that...
But surely, Honorable Mukunji, some of these proposals come from your party leader,
it's
the
okay,
president himself.
okay, but you know, you are not given a directive, and also your brain is taken away. So I'm just saying there are more important things that should be discussed in this committee. That is agenda, even if it's not being mentioned outright. It is to change the Constitution. And you know, here we have two, Azimio and Kenya Kwanza coming together. So this is once in a lifetime moment to ensure that we push the right agendas in terms of what we want. And I'm going to rally behind my young parliamentarians. I'm the chairman of the Kenya Young Parliamentarians. I'm going to rally behind my Kenya Young Parliamentarians. We push the agenda of ensuring that this is an economic change in the Constitution. It is not a socio-accommodative, more positions. And we mentioned this during campaigns, that we are not going to pursue a route of looking at things that will benefit a few people.
Are you saying you're going to oppose some of this agenda?
Yeah, of course.
Because they talk about inclusivity and establishment of new offices.
I mean, Fred, let me ask you. Right now, when it comes to the issue of inclusivity, people don't want to be included in positions. They want to be included in the economic empowerment of people. So when I tell you this, I know what I mean. Let me give you an example. When we put the issue of the two-third gender rule, which if it was literally accommodated and it was implemented, we could be having a house of more than 500 members of parliament, even 600, depending on the elections and how they go. If we implement that, we will also not be doing a lot of service in terms of the decrease in the wage bill. The reason why we also have this politics of 5 years, another 5 years of problems, and immediately after the election, things start happening, is because the next 5 years, already politicians have started thinking about the next election. We need to look at these things and see how we can give presidents, MPs, anybody, ample time to implement their plans and agendas.
Okay.
And all these things, and I'm happy to have my good friend here, experts, we need to have them being spoken about, and at the right moment. And I know these guys are going to open their doors to listen to people. They cannot just close doors and yes, they are bright, I know them, but they are not the holders of the changes in this country. Okay. They have to open their doors, listen to people. Even you can have these as the agreed lines of engagement, but then the end document can have totally different things, depending on what people are telling you. This is what we want. Okay,
but if all the experts say that this whole discussion is about the distribution of resources, the national cake, how to distribute it equitably throughout the country. Issues to do with the limitation of boundaries, for example. But there also seems to be a disconnect in the understanding of the roles that our leaders need to play. Hence, the demand for funds like the CDF, the Senate's Oversight Fund, the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, because the roles of the members of parliament, both the Senate and the National Assembly, are clearly defined. Legislation, oversight, representation. It is this issue where we're now seeing even MCAs demanding for ward development fund that seems to be going against what Kenyans discussed before. Because when Kenyans elect a member of the National Assembly, are we saying they do not understand the roles that this person should be playing? That is oversight, representation, and legislation that doesn't necessarily need CDF for it to implement.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is, in my view, I think this particular matter has been put on the as part of the agenda items because they want to get the buy-in of the members of parliament. I am not sure that it is an issue that needs to be discussed by...
The Supreme Court has already announced itself on this matter.
The Supreme Court has already announced itself in this matter. And so if members of parliament have issues with that, the place and the way to address it is through this legal route, which is the Supreme Court. And I think so that if they want to add an additional role on the 3 roles which are already overwhelming, then they need to go back to the Supreme Court to either review its ruling or
go back to the people.
To the people, yeah. So I don't think it should be an agenda item at least. And I think Honorable Mukunji did even say that this is a matter they've been able to discuss exhaustively, and they truly know what needs to be done. So I don't think it should be one of the agendas that is preoccupying the bipartisan team, you know. So, but again, just going back to the Constitution, I think the Constitution is, like they say, what lawyers would say, it's very, very clear on the roles of members of parliament or elected leaders, you know, representation, legislation, and of course oversight. If they also want to execute a matters development, then they need to find the right route, and that means they need to go to back to the ruling of the Supreme Court on this particular matter.
Because Honorable Mukunji, the discussion seems a bit disjointed, that there are so many things we don't even understand, that even the system of government that we currently have, we struggle to find the place of this official leader of the opposition. We have minority and majority in the House of Parliament. So where will this leader of official opposition be?
Well, before I come to that question, I really need to talk about the NGCDF as a fund. First of all, it's important to note clearly right now, Fred, that the Member of Parliament has 0 roles when it comes to running of the CDF. NGCDF has its own...
0?
Yes, as its own secretariat, it has own committees, and it is only that in the devolved functions and devolved lines of this country, constituency is one of those units. And the NGCDF fund lands on the constituency as its own line of devolved functions. And that also gives the Member of Parliament some sort of an oversight role on what is happening to that fund. And I will tell you, Fred, that having been around for a while, if you look at NGCDF and compare with all other funds, including the county government, you'll find one of the best run resources for this country is NGCDF. It is very clear to see changes, projects, and very impactful things that have happened in NGCDF. And everybody I've met agrees on that, including some governors. And
shouldn't the conversation therefore be what we were talking about, that a review of the roles of the member of the National Assembly, because
to give him more power on
that is not part of your role as an MP.
Listen, I don't want to play a bigger role in the running of CDF. It is already a well-structured fund, and I've always even told the president that if there is any funds, if there is anything that works in this country, the model used to implement the NGCDF fund should be actually be studied and copied in the implementation of government projects, because it works and it doesn't have loopholes. There is no a big line of area where people can get their money, their hands in public coffers. If you find a place having NGCDF, you find schools being built, and it is a very clear way of accountability from the committee, from the the committee of oversight committee, going all the way to even before doing your BQs that are supposed to be approved all over the country, and they are compared, and it helps a lot in the implementation of that. Now, the entrenchment of this in the Constitution is very crucial, and I'll tell you why. I have been a member of Parliament right now for a year and a few days. What I have also achieved on this is enormous, and it is the one that is actually giving hope of even changing my constituents' level of education. We are talking of the money is used on bursaries, and you have seen even other constituencies coming up with a very brilliant ways of ensuring parents don't feel the heat of the challenge of school fees. And some schools don't even get money from government that can help their operations. NGCDF has always stepped in on those. Putting this in the Constitution, it means that now that money is ring-fenced, and nobody, no madman, because these days courts have, I don't want to criticize the courts, but any Tom, Dick and Harry wakes up, gets broke and says, let me run to court to challenge something, then the High Court pronounces itself. It becomes a crisis, and these things really affect so many people. And if that happens, then we have a challenge. Now, I think your question, I didn't answer your question.
Because he wants to
No, I was just going to say...
Let's stay on the CDF for now.
On the CDF, I think there's no doubt.
Yes.
No one is arguing that CDF has not been impactful. In some cases, it has been quite impactful. I think what people are questioning and what the Supreme Court did rule on is not about the importance or lack of the fund, but it is the constitutionality of this fund, and that is what the House and Honorable Mukunji and team needs to address. How do we make this constitutional? And what we are saying is that to make it constitutional is not just inserting another clause in the Constitution, is reviewing the roles of the elected leaders, members of Parliament, which so far are 3. And so if they are also to include the fund as it is being proposed, then they need to add a fourth role, which is now execution of development. So I don't think it's going to be as easy as just saying we need to anchor it in the Constitution. It will mean even, reviewing the roles of members of Parliament. And it's the same thing with this issue that I think Parliament picked up of having cabinet report to Parliament. You know, I don't know, I think Honorable would advise better than me. The fact that these are strangers in the House. They're coming to if they're talking to a committee, that's fine. But if you're now including them in the proceedings of the House, those are strangers, and that's a totally new model of governance. The office that have been proposed of the office of the opposition leader totally changes our model of governance to bring in something. It will be a mongrel. So I think the conversation that we need to have, and I think this committee, this team that is engaged in the bipartisan talk, need to look beyond just inserting a few clauses here to anchor some of this item in the Constitution, is to look at it comprehensively. And I think, Mukunji, I agree with you that we need a conversation on how do we make this Constitution work for us?
Exactly.
Are we relooking at the whole governance system?
So let us not just, because otherwise moving forward, every other election, if something doesn't work, we'll say, now let us have another deputy of opposition.
Yes, the risk is that we might end up really confused about the kind of government system we have. Is it parliamentary? Is it presidential? What exactly is this? Where, for example, will the leader of official opposition fall? We have 3 arms of government: legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Where will he be? Is it as part of the legislature? Is it as part of the executive?
Okay, well, we agree totally with what my good friend is saying here, but let me say that one of the things that I feel must be solved and this one I have not felt it being captured very well or on these talks, and it is very critical, is the issue of somebody just disputing an election, running haywire, causing trouble, while he is looking for some leverage to get somewhere. And that is something that has made this country to be in a political mode 24/7, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. I believe we need to critically think about solving that issue that actually makes government not run efficiently as they should run. And I don't think the office of the opposition leader will solve that. I really don't get it, because what will happen is even the person will have even more power to run you down. We need to have a logical way of giving governments time to run. And I feel we should even go to an extent of putting laws that say, if you don't support and the elections have been done, but you feel you want to continue holding this country hostage, there should be repercussions on this. And those are things that
what about the
we
question
need,
of
we need to think about.
Winner takes all? Because I think that is a premise from which the president came out with this proposal for the formation of the office.
How does the winner takes all? It takes it all, surely. When I won an election in Manyata constituency, as a member of parliament, I did not start speaking to my opponents, telling them, now that you have won, let me make you my manager or my CDF chairman. You know, it doesn't work that way. And obviously, all over the world, we have had elections. People who lose always go back to the drawing board or to their political parties. And political parties are also a very important tool to ensure somebody continues to run his issues. Political party, like the Azimio political party, instead of going to the streets, they could have had their way in parliament, bring their own laws, bring issues that they feel are important to this nation, that can be supported on both sides.
What, for example, do you think was the president's intention? Because this was his introduction.
Yes.
This was his proposal. I even wrote to the Houses of Parliament as far back as December last year, proposing that. What do you think was his thinking?
It is the frustration of looking at this honorable former prime minister running around telling people to put sufurias on the head and trying to create relevance to get on the table that is right now. So when
that
he
was specifically
saw that,
remedy that
basically was trying to remedy this. But I also feel that is also some sort of lack of discipline in this country. And we should be very careful with the people who get to those political levels of the highest office on the land.
Okay.
They should have some sort of love and patriotism of this country that they cannot allow it to run down and mess up. And that is a conversation that I will also be having with my members on the issues of what we would like to see happening in our country.
I mean, I think for me, it's just about doing things for posterity. One, we need to ask ourselves what works for us. I mean, we can't do it for a few people, you know, or we can't do it because we are frustrated. We really need to ask ourselves, what is this system of governance that is going to work for us? Otherwise, and we've seen it every other election, we come up with more of a mongrel of a governance system model, which no one understands.
Yet,
you know?
with the push to a new constitution, that was one of the things that we needed to remedy once and for all. What system of governance have we adopted? Is it parliamentary? Is it presidential? What exactly are we doing?
But Fred,
when we keep re-looking at that 13 years later, what are we really saying about the implementation of the document?
Why do we have to define the system of government? You know, sometimes we also want to be, it's like that old age of communism, patriotism, I mean, democratic. I mean, we can have our own government. Why do we have to be defined?
But even that government should be defined in some document.
Fred, for example, the issue of ministers appearing in this house, and I'm a member of the Committee on Procedures and Rules of the House, and I participated in forming the laws that looks at how the ministers will appear. First of all, even before anything, ministers do appear in committees of the House. And when they appear, it is normally a question asked on the floor of the House, given to the committee, then the committee transfers the question to the minister. It is a whole long process. Now, it is a straightforward process where, and I'll give you an example, I've achieved a lot through those questions in the House. I have asked questions to the ministers, and they have corrected those issues. I asked about the macadamia and the issue of the pricing. The Honorable Inturi came to the House, explained and told the people that we have actually shortlisted a few companies to do export of in-shell macadamia. I could not have gotten the report even today if we were going the committee route. Oversight role of the parliament gives it power to actually call these people and bring them in the House and answer questions. The thin in between lines of what is this a parliamentary system?
We cannot ignore the provisions of the Constitution.
Is this a parliamentary, a presidential system? Those are things we should also get out. We are too much westernized. For no specific reason.
No, for me, I think good intentions, good ideas must be anchored in the Constitution. That is the foundational document. We can have all the good ideas, but we don't want to implement good ideas just because they are good ideas, but they are unconstitutional. Because if we continue doing that, tomorrow we will find a cabinet secretary spending so much money on something they think is a good idea, but it's not constitutional. What are we going to do? We are a country of laws. So whatever we are doing and implementing, all these good ideas must be anchored in the law.
Even Mambo Tatu could be very good ideas.
Very good ideas. I mean, all of us want to see these cartels dealt with. And truly, we want to see them face the full force of the law. But truly, we don't want to see a situation where you take law into your own hands and deal with them in a way that you think is going to help. We saw it in Philippines, where the former president, Duterte, went shooting drug lords left, right, and center. At the end of it all, you find thousands of people have been shot. It is not, you are not sure that truly they were drug lords. So I think if we adopt a system of rule of law, we must stick to that. It has its own limitations, but once we adopt that and we say, this is the system that we're going to utilize, let's adopt that. So that we do not just say it's a good idea, it's a good thing to do, it's an important thing, but it has to be anchored. It
has to be anchored in the law. The other big thing that will be discussed there is the restructuring and reconstitution of the IEBC. This has been a thorn in the flesh for years on end, for decades actually. And 40 plus years later, a new constitution in place, we're still grappling with the same problem. That despite the fact that we have systems in place defined on how to come up with the IEBC, we're still haggling on the same. It takes us back to the IEPPG days where political parties had to come up with a formula and suggestions of who were to form that electoral body back in 97, I think. Close to 40 years later, 30 years later, we're still talking about having political parties sit around a table and reconstitute the IEBC.
Let me say this, Fred, that I agree with you. The IEBC issue has not yet gotten it right. We have not gotten it right yet because the same thing I've said, that elections come, then the loser always says it has been stolen. I believe even on the commissioners or who is the chairman, who is what, there should be a clear guideline, and this is a very crucial conversation on the systems to ensure transparency, free and fairness. And even if we put the enemy of who and who, because there will always be sides. Any person who says I want to be a commissioner will always come from somewhere, will always come from a political party. That is if he has been in this country. I believe the best way to handle this is through putting up systems, and systems that are able to be verifiable. Systems that are able to be, they can be scrutinized for a minute. Why do we have to have a conversation on opening of servers today? Does it mean that we didn't have a clear transparency in terms of the data coming in on both sides? So It's a conversation that we must have. Constitution of IEBC is an issue to me. Actually, that is not the conversation. The conversation is the systems to ensure that elections are run in a fair manner. And that involves us putting up a system that we can say this is a system everybody can trust on. It has happened in many countries. IEBC is not a unique thing in Kenya. We have elections running institutions all over the continent, all over the world, that can be able, and we can be able to borrow from them.
Okay.
The integrity you mentioned is also another big issue. We need to know who should hold that office. That is also something that should come out clear from this committee. Who should run?
Then it begs the question, because independent committees are defined and provided for by this constitution.
Yes.
Are we saying, therefore, that it is our lack of implementation of the 2010 constitution 13 years later that we are finding these problems? That even if we change it now, 13 years later we'll be talking about whether or not we've implemented it fully. Because the independence of the IEBC, surely that is not in question.
Yeah.
In fact, the first word is independent electoral, not
Yes,
No, I think it begs the question of whether we've been able to implement the Constitution fully and properly. I think we have to ensure that we implement the Constitution fully and properly. So I think what we should be asking ourselves is not just about IEBC, it's also about the other aspects and elements of the Constitution. Have we been able to implement them fully and properly? But on the IEBC, I think we go back to the ruling of the 2017, the Maraga ruling that nullified the presidential elections. I think it indicted more or less IEBC, and so there were certain changes that were supposed to be made, and that is when we were supposed to have this conversation that we are having now. But as it is, we are always people who are looking at a crisis. So once the crisis is over, then we move to the next thing. Yeah. And I think, Honorable, I totally agree with you, but that this issue of being reactive,
yes,
is causing us more problems, because now you see we want to review IEBC because of some election, but not really because we want to ensure that in the future, we are not being proactive, we're just being reactive. And so what they're going to do is look for some short-term measures. And it could be maybe saying that each formation is going to identify who is going to sit on that IEBC as a stopgap measure. But that is not doing something for posterity. It won't help us in the next and future elections. So we really need to have a conversation about this IEBC. And I think for me it goes beyond personalities in the IEBC. It can be anyone. If you have the right structures, anyone can sit on that, provided they meet the integrity threshold. But if the structures are there, if the structures are well defined and it is clear that it's going to ensure independence, then I don't think politicians should be involved in that. So politicians should be involved at the point of how do we make sure we have structures that can inspire the confidence of the public. But we can't be changing just because you and I perhaps are not happy with the person.
Are we not taking the easy way out? That, and I saw NARC Kenya party leader Martha Karua mentioned that any attempt to change the constitution right now would be misguided, that the issue would be to call for a proper implementation or full implementation of the constitution that we already have. Now we're finding ourselves in some difficulty, and instead of implementing, because the remedy is found in the constitution, we're opting to change it instead.
I disagree with the Honorable Martha Karua. And I want to say what I said when I started here, that our constitution must be live. Our constitution cannot be a rock that you cannot move
or change your ship.
Because that will be a problem we have left for our children. I believe every single time we must have a conversation on constitution and its level of implementation and its level of being accommodative to the daily and future of this country, including the issue of climate change. These are things that we have to really be looking at, reviewing, and that's why even in the National Assembly, we have the Committee on Oversight and Implementation of the Constitution. We have institutions that are also supposed to continue looking at these things and what laws. many of the laws that we have made through acts of parliament, some are supposed to be in the constitution. Because now, this is the way to go. I believe Mother would be playing politics with this issue, probably because she has not been included in the committee when she is saying that. And the moment we actually look at the constitution, review it, it is always good to see the changes that we can make. If you look at the UK constitution, this is not an isolated issue. It is more like an open constitution where it is aligned according to the issues of the day, and changes can happen any day, anytime. And we made this constitution from an array of things that had happened during the Moi era. And we were saying, we cannot touch that wire. We cannot touch. We need to empower our institutions to actually achieve what we wanted. But at the same time, due to the economic times of the day, we also need to review and see whether our constitution is killing our country through the economic burdens that are there even today.
Some of these discussions could and should possibly lead to a referendum. We are seeing that suggestion by the 5 eminent individuals who have said and undertaken to kickstart collection of signatures to kickstart a popular initiative for a review of the Constitution. Don't you think that probably we should consider that? Let's start with you, Raphael. That at this constitutional moment that we are in right now, and the politicians are seated around a table at Bomas talking about some things that could lead to changes in the Constitution, and some Kenyans are thinking the same, but outside there, that we should join up and probably involve the whole country in making this decision.
I mean, certainly, I think of the items that have been listed, I think 3 out of 5 will require constitutional change or amendments of some sort.
Major enough to require a referendum?
Enough to require a referendum. And that takes me to the other point that I was mentioning, that perhaps we need to have a proper conversations on review of this constitution, not just a few elements that the bipartisan talks team has picked. Because if you look at something like the 2/3 gender rule, I mean, constitutional issue. For you to change anything there, you need to go back to the people. It's a referendum. The office of the opposition leader is not just something you can create through an act of parliament, because it changes the model of governance. It will require a constitutional change. So I think we need to have a comprehensive conversation on how to change this, on how to review, assess, but also review the constitution. I don't think that is going to happen based on what they've already said, that they have 5 items, they have 60 days. In 60 days, you cannot move around the country, collect views, and identify what are the issues that people want to.
So you don't foresee a referendum happening?
I mean, there could be a referendum, but it will be more of a forced referendum than something that people really agree with, even in terms of their agenda items. I'm sure there are many things that people would want to have here, but they've already set a cap on the days, a cap on the agendas, and so it means that we have to go by what they are.
The reason I'm asking this is because previous popular initiatives like the Punguza Mzigo or Kwa Kenya have always met some hurdle which is more or less political, that without political goodwill, no popular initiative will see the light of day. And so for any popular initiative to survive, the politicians must be right in the middle of it as well.
Well, let me say that you are spot on that, and we have 2 experiences before. One was the Punguza Mzigo, the other one is the BBI initiative, which both failed to achieve the results they wanted. And I want to say that this is also not unique. I mean, constitutionally, we have to ensure we involve the people, because I am totally against us politicians thinking we know everything and we can change things that have serious impact on the population of the day. Because even a creation of an office that is an office of the opposition leader, that office, the person who will be holding that office will want to feel very powerful. So most likely you'll have shadow cabinet ministers all manner of security in his whatever disposal, big offices, a big budget. I mean, surely these are not things that we are supposed to be doing in isolation. We have to involve the people. So I will stand and say that whenever we need to involve the people, we should involve the people. And I believe the best way to do things in this country is by ensuring that people are engaged.
Do you foresee a referendum in President Ruto's first term?
On these things that have been suggested here, which I feel they are not in, I mean, if we are talking of a constitutional change, a real constitutional change, I've said and I'll repeat again, it has to be an economical change or amendment in the constitution.
Okay.
So if we are going to do a constitutional change, we have to add some more things in this thing. We have to add the issue of ensuring that we have a hope for our youth. We need to redefine the constitution and accommodate the young people in a way that they are able to see there is future that is guaranteed.
But gentlemen, we are out of time, so I'll give you an opportunity to say your final words.
No, I was just going to say that people are not helpless in this case, and from experience we've seen it. BBI was stopped in its tracks even after putting in so much resources and people moving around. So I don't even think that with this process, people are still helpless. I mean, of course, we have the judicial system. People can still seek redress from there. And Kenyans are more aware these days. So they'll take what they agree with and they will discard and protest against whatever they do not agree with. So I think the best way is to ensure that people are involved at each and every level so that the ownership is broadened, the ownership is entrenched in the people. Without that, you can make the few changes that you want, you can make the moves that you want, but then it won't be owned. And I think that situation, things will just collapse. So I think to avoid that, make sure people are involved from the onset and at each and every level so that it is a people's process. It's not a process that is seen to be for a few people who are agreeing. So that we want to see that even these 5 agenda items subjected to something, people's participation or public participation.
Very good.
So that they can say, look, this agenda we don't think should be on the table. This one, put it aside, let's, and then that way eventually the product is something that everyone owns and everyone is happy with.
Thank you, Raphael.
I'll just take a cue from what he has said. I mean, seriously, public participation is actually one of the most critical things that has been ignored in this country, including some issues that involve the project. This dialogue committee, before it does its recommendations and them taking anywhere in our day life, it has to go to the people. We have to have public participation. And not the public participations that involves choreographed members of the public, but serious public participation that is well transparent and involve even other institutions of government. I believe if we do that, we will be able to be going on the right track. And I just want to say that this is our country. We have got to keep the conversation going, and we ensure that every single thing that is happening, our voices are heard. It's very important.
Thank you so much, Honorable Mukunji Gitonga, MP Manyata constituency, and Raphael Obonyo, public policy analyst. Our panelists this morning helping us understand the whole issue with the National Dialogue Committee, with the talks happening in Bomas, and the entrenchment of the deliberations and the list of agenda that they came up with yesterday. So, gentlemen, you'll allow me to read this editorial comment before we wrap up this session. So yesterday's coup d'etat in Gabon once again highlights a recurring issue in many African countries, a disconcerting pattern of military takeovers and leadership instability. Yet, even as we aspire for democracy to thrive and declare our disapproval for hostile takeovers, we must appreciate that the military action in parts of the continent simply underscores a deep-rooted problem of a leadership so disconnected from the general population. Effective governance requires a strong connection between those in power and the citizens they represent. Unfortunately, too often in Africa, leaders become detached from the concerns and aspirations of their people. There is a risk of becoming so consumed by the newfound power that you lose sight of the transient nature of your authority. This can lead to a dangerous sense of entitlement and a disconnect from the reality that time in power will eventually come to an end. The Gabonese example serves as a stark reminder that leaders who ignore this reality may be caught off guard when their tenure is abruptly terminated. The ousted leader's plea for people to make noise about his affliction highlights the level of disconnection. It appears that the deposed leader was unaware that the noise on the streets of Libreville was not a cry for his rescue, but rather a celebration of his downfall. This incident should serve as a lesson for leaders across the African continent at whatever level. The governor, MP,